There we go. The grand entrance. The grand entrance. I like it.
I'm a moonwalk later.
Welcome to episode 50 of the We All Serve podcast. For those of you that 50. Are just episode 50, we're going to spend a minute talking about that. But for those of you that are just listening and not watching, you're missing out. That's all I can say is you're missing out. So shameless plug. Make sure you get on YouTube and make sure you click subscribe. But if you're just watching on
call
YouTube,
a friend, send a carrier pigeon,
review and share. There you go. But episode 50, Angel, we made it.
We did, and we had a second half, and now we're refreshed and we're ready to go for another 50 or 200 or however long they have us before we get boycotted.
I know. No, it's
wow, what a journey! I mean, seriously, all the people we've talked to, all the people that we've affected and not affected. That's the wrong word. Touched. Oh shoot, that's the wrong word too. Darn it. Impacted.
Soldier and sailor over here trying to make things happen. But hey, whatever. We're doing it every day.
Yeah,
we are doing it. I'm still digesting last week's conversation, our first week back. Greg and Brian, fascinating individuals, and we've got.
They were intense. They were super intense.
Yeah, super intense. But they're doing good stuff, and a lot of interesting connections came from that conversation, and it's always fun to see the comments and feedback that comes in. And check this out, we're getting some comments over here.
The Monica McNeil. Oh my gosh. So I feel so lucky. Our 50th episode, and we got Monica on here. This is wonderful. And Monica connected me with someone named Catherine, who's in the organization Vets in Tech, and we're gonna have a follow-on conversation. Probably have her on the podcast in a follow-on episode. But it's been, I mean, what you did, Shalom, with the evacuation and supporting everything with Fort Bliss and the Army and the troops, getting everyone out of Afghanistan and getting them home, that was just miraculous. And I'm just glad you're more safe and sound now than you were yesterday.
Well, it's been inspiring to see the team effort. We've been obviously at Fort Bliss. Just an amazing task force that has come together from the religious support. I just got off the phone actually, putting in a call to prayer system. We've seen, I can tell you as a young Jewish kid over here, I've seen hundreds of prayer rugs coming in from around the country, from Jewish communities all over. It's been amazing. But then watching what's been happening from the Marines, airmen, sailors, soldiers that, on ground in Kabul, getting our new guests, because that's how they're being treated, guests into Ramstein Air Force Base, being vetted, and then coming into the United States and being treated as guests, and made sure that they're getting the religiously appropriate meals, halal meals, and getting all of their supplies. I just saw a picture of a bunch of kids looking at going shopping for shoes, essentially looking at their favorite shoes, and that's the way it should be.
The logistics blow me away with going with something like that. I mean, just the things you take for granted, the religious things, the food, whether it's kosher, whether it's whatever, the country centric. Because if you give them wrong food, it upsets their diet, it makes them unhappy, and makes the whole room stink. It's just not good.
Yeah, no, it's been it's true, but it's been amazing, and that ties to this Saturday, I guess, is the 20th anniversary of 9/11. So, Angel, you and I were talking offline right before this. I mean, where were you?
Geez, mine is a very unique story. Actually, let me back it up a little bit and say congratulations. This weekend, I got a chance to spend with my two dearest friends in the whole world, Captain Omar Martinez, which is an 06 in the Navy, and Commander 05 Christopher Sands. I flew to Virginia for his promotion, and I've known these guys forever. And it's always, whenever we're in different places around the world in the Navy, we would kind of follow each other. It would just happen. Well, 9/11, I was just in Chicago the day before. I still had a Portillo's Italian beef sandwich in my lunchbox on September 11th when I went to the Carrier Airborne Early Warning Squadron 125. And we're AWACS, eyes in the sky, air traffic control kind of thing. Trade Center 1 gets hit, Trade Center 2 gets hit. And they said, get your butt to the flight line. So me and about 45 other people went down to the flight line, and we were on the carrier within like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And we were doing it was called Operation Noble Eagle, and we were doing the coastal basically the defense of the United States. And so the crazy thing was, it's pretty emotional. Chris, the guy who just made Commander, he was in the Pentagon, and he was working for the Chief of Legislative Affairs, and he just happened to be in the other wing when the Pentagon got hit. And then Captain Omar Martinez, he was at Third Fleet dealing with all that stuff. And I'm like, oh my God. And you just sit here and you feel like when you tell people that haven't been there, you almost feel like you're lying to people. Like there's no way yeah, actually I really was there. And that really did happen. And it was very surreal. And just a sense of focus and commitment and what you needed to do to protect our families. So It was pretty intense. So this is a very hard day for me.
Absolutely. And it's so many emotions. And obviously I talk to veterans all the time. And obviously on this podcast, we talk to folks that joined in the immediate aftermath of 9/11 and see how much has changed, but also see how much is the same. And ultimately, I look behind your shoulder over there. Freedom isn't free, and folds of honor over there. There you go. And it's just amazing. So I don't want to. We're now 6 minutes in, and I'm looking at the bottom of my screen, and I see our special guest over here.
We have to find out where Priya was on 9/11. Let's ask her.
So let's do that. There we go. Bringing her there on the screen. Priya, so let me do the quick intro over here, because we have so much to talk about, and truly excited to have our 50th guest here on the show. Priya Sridhar is an Emmy-award winning political reporter and host of Politically Speaking, a weekly political show that airs on Sundays on NBC 7 in California. She comes to NBC San Diego from KPBS, where she worked as general assignment reporter and fill-in host for the station's radio and TV programs. Prior to San Diego, she worked for a CBS affiliate in San Antonio, Texas, has worked as a White House correspondent, a morning show co-host in New York City, and for a station headquartered out of Nigeria. She's been a Washington correspondent and anchor for RT, went on to work for that channel as a South Asia bureau chief and correspondent posted in New Delhi. She's worked for NBC affiliate in Maine, and I want to talk about that, but also for the Associated Press in Chicago. And she has a undergrad in international relations and history.
Where'd she go?
And master's degree in journalism from the Medill School of Journalism.
Go Cats!
Northwestern University. And has covered some fascinating stories, including the aftermath of the shooting of Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri for the Associated Press, and the historic 2015 presidential elections in Nigeria. But here's something really, really interesting about Priya. Priya is originally from outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and she's an officer in the United States Navy Reserve and fell in love with San Diego through her work in the Navy. She's co-president of the Asian American Journalists Association San Diego and on the board of directors for Military Veterans and Journalism. With all of that said, again, welcome, Priya Sridhar, to the program.
Thank you so much. Whenever I didn't expect you to read all of that, so it always makes me feel like I'm 100 years old, but I've just wandered around very quickly.
Glad you did. So as the only Army guy here on the screen, I'm totally going to turn it over to Angel over here to kick this off.
Well, I'm glad you're on here, because this is the first person that we've had. This is the first 50th episode we've ever had. It's pretty amazing.
There you go.
And yeah, we set the bar so high. And I'm curious, what drew you to the public? I mean, you're a PAO. Let's talk about that. And what drew you to the PAO did you see that you were doing a lot of things in the field and in the civilian capacity with NBC and CBS, and said, you know what? There's a whole different aspect that I don't understand and don't really have a flavor for or a really true understanding of, and let me go ahead and try that out. And it really gives you a lot of credibility, and from what I see.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I mean, it was actually first, I think, a desire to serve my country, as cliche and corny as that all sounds, but especially because we're talking about, the 20th anniversary of 9/11, which, by the way, I was in high school for that, and I do remember it very vividly. So now you guys can figure out exactly how old I am, or ballpark. So yeah, it was more of a desire to serve. My parents are immigrants from India, and I'm a first-generation American. So I always had a sense, I think, of patriotism, because my parents sort of repeated to me a lot, as I think a lot of first generation Americans here growing up that you're so lucky and fortunate to have been born here. You get opportunities and have access to resources that you would have maybe never gotten had you lived somewhere else on the other side of the world. So I think I always had a sense of gratitude growing up for being born in the United States. And so that actually led me to applying to be a foreign service officer in the State Department. I had spent some time overseas, as you mentioned, as the South Asia Bureau Chief. So I was posted in New Delhi for 2 years, and most of my friends when I was overseas were expats. So I had a lot of American, Brits, Australian friends, and they sort of introduced me to the whole world of diplomacy. And so when I came back to the United States, I was unfortunately unemployed for a while, which happens a lot in the news business. And my friends were like, listen, you love being overseas. You've always had this desire to serve your country. Why don't you apply to be a foreign service officer in the State Department? And I thought, intriguing. Let me try to do that. So I went for it, made it all the way through the process. But as you guys know, with the government, everything takes 1,000 years. So by the time I got through that process, I had landed a job in news, and that was at the Associated Press in Chicago. So I felt very torn about it because news was always my number one passion. I love journalism. I do feel as though that's also a way that you can serve your country and serve your community, because freedom of speech and freedom of the press is essential to a strong democracy, in my opinion. But I still had this desire to do something more. And so a friend of mine told me about this Navy Direct Commission Officer program, which is it's a very tiny percentage of reserve officers who go through this program. Most officers who are in the reserve came off active duty and went straight into the reserve. But there are a select few, and a lot of them are prior enlisted active duty. But then there is a small group of us who come straight from the civilian world with like literally no military experience, and they're looking to recruit us in certain fields. And so public affairs just happened to be one of them. And obviously with my background, my professional background in journalism and communications, it sort of made the most sense. And once I went through that whole process and I joined the Navy. And of course, as you mentioned, as a civilian reporter, I had a lot of experience dealing with military PAOs. I was just like, wow, there is a huge divide here between reporters and the military. I don't really know why it exists. I feel as though the communication could be a lot better. So I'm going to try to do my very tiny part in bridging that gap if I can.
Yeah, it's huge. It's and what are some of the things you noticed? I mean, what were some? You mentioned the delta between perception and reality. What are some of the key things you go, wow, I had this all wrong?
Well, I mean, so I would say like whenever you're around a group of military people, you guys might remember this yourselves and your audience too. I mean, one of the fastest ways I can tell you to clear a room is to tell people you're a reporter. They want nothing to do with you, So there's this just weirdly inherently adversarial / paranoid relationship I found between the press and the military. And I think it's thought in a lot of military circles that journalists are out there, or reporters are out there to somehow trick you or get information out of you that you're not supposed to give. And of course, there's a lot of stuff that on the military side, you have to be careful about disclosing too much information that could jeopardize some sort of operational security, national security, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, I found that I didn't understand necessarily why people in the military were so scared of us. And we, on the other hand, sometimes get very intimidated by people in uniform. By we, I mean reporters. And so I find that a lot of, green reporters, so reporters who don't have a lot of experience, they're trying to talk to military folks. They're using a lot of acronyms. They're using a lot of jargon. It doesn't make any sense. And it goes like this. So, well, for people who are listening, can't see what I'm doing, but I mean, they're missing the message.
Cross signals. Got it.
Cross signals. There we go. Yes, exactly. Nailed it. See, this is why I do TV and not radio. But yeah, so, I mean, I found that all it really took was military people sort of thinking about who their audience was and realizing that there's a lot of good that can be done by talking about what we're doing, right, as the military, whether that's overseas for an overseas audience or even for the American public. As you guys mentioned, I am a political reporter now, and it's hugely important for people in Washington to have a sense of what our military is doing. They're the ones who vote on the budget. So yeah, I mean, there's a million reasons why it's important for the military to have a cohesive strategic communication message, and so I think that's where public affairs first came from. And yeah, I just think that in general, there could be a lot more of a friendly relationship between reporters and the military, because I think they both need each other.
So I agree, but Shalom, give me 1 second. I just want to offer something up that a perspective. The reason why people don't want to talk to you guys is not because they're worried about, okay, they might be worried about stepping on their words. Okay, fine. But the biggest reason is because if you get done talking to a reporter, you got 10 of your buddies standing behind you getting ready to bust your butt and go, oh, Mr. Hollywood famous guy. Okay, we see how it is. Okay, showboat, you got it all figured out. And the ribbing and all the stuff that goes along with that.
Oh yeah, I hear, and I mean, now that I'm in the military, of course, I'm like used to that culture and all of that. But I think that, I mean, I actually think that a lot of it comes down from like the senior officer level. And I've met a lot of and it really depends. I mean, there is some people that buy into the idea that it's important to communicate, and there are others that are just extremely tight-lipped, closed doors. This is my last priority. But I think when you look at other countries and what they're doing, I mean, people are using social media, people are using traditional media to get their message across, whether, again, that be to their own people or to their potential allies or their potential adversaries. It's important to communicate with all of those groups. All of those groups are stakeholders. And there's a way to communicate with all of them.
Sometimes it's what you don't say. It's the value signaling when you don't say anything. You're like, okay.
And I can tell you as a reporter, there's nothing that drives us more crazy or makes us more suspicious than when people don't want to talk to us, because I'm like, but why? Especially people who are, public affairs, when that's literally the purpose of your job description is to engage with the media. When you stop responding to us, I immediately think, wait, there's something that I want to know that you're hiding from me, So it doesn't make a lot of sense. And the greatest PAOs are the ones who are just honest with me. They say, listen, Priya, here are the reasons that we can't talk about this, but let me give you this. This is a little nugget that I can give. This is what I can give you. Here are the reasons why I can't give you that. Just talk, just explain yourself, and that creates for better things to happen down the road too, I think.
So Priya, I'm excited soon to talk to you about military veterans and journalism, because I know you found that sort of that common bond with others that share those similarities. But I want to take it all the way back, and I know it's not all the way back because you're a junior officer, and I'm the same camp as you, but I ask all of our guests, what was it like, going to a recruiter's office? But I'm really curious for you. You mentioned this right after I shared your bio, that you've done a lot of things, that you came into the military pretty well accomplished. Not many people coming into the military can say that they've had all of those amazing, incredible assignments. So what was that experience? What was that reaction from your friends, your colleagues and family when you said, "Hey, I'm picking up for a little bit, and I'm going to training where I'm no longer in charge"?
I mean, I think people thought I had lost my mind, to be honest, including my family. Everyone was just like, why is this necessary? Like, are you okay? Like, do you have money in your bank account? Like, what is going on? And I was like, this has nothing to do with money. They're like, are you bored? Are you going through some sort of like one-third life crisis or something? Yeah. And I was just like, no, I mean, it definitely happened, and it evolved in a strange way. But it also, as you know, because of the bureaucracy, it takes a very long time to actually get yourself all the way into the military. So it's not like you just trip and, are in a recruiter's office and the next thing you know, you have a uniform on. Like, there's time in between that initial encounter and when you're actually like shipping off to officer school. So I had a lot of time to like course correct myself if I thought I was like heading down the wrong path, but I sort of didn't think that. And I think I mean, one thing about me is I love to challenge myself. I love to get outside of my comfort zone. And I almost like it when people are like, have you lost your mind? Like, what are you doing? You can't do that. You're never going to make it. That makes me, I'm a very stubborn person. So I'm just like, yes, I will. And I'm going to be like the best, and you're going to see, and I'm going to show you, and it's going to be great, you know? So yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. And I think, you know, as you guys know too, I think when you ask a lot of people in the military why they joined the military, I mean, I don't know the actual stats on this, but I'm pretty sure that there are stats to back this up, that most people have like a family member who was in the military. So I never had that, which made it very complicated and confusing for my parents to understand it. And as I mentioned, they're immigrants from another country where the military and that culture is looked at a little bit differently. So that was sort of difficult to explain to them. But at that point, you know, I was past the age of 30 when I joined. So I had already done, you know, 10 to 15 years of rebellious life choices. So they were used to it at this point. They're just like, there's no point in trying to talk her out of it. If anything, if we even try to go down that path, we're probably going to convince her to do it even more. So, yeah, I mean, and then from reporters, it was sort of the same thing. Like, you're going to go work for Uncle Sam? Really? Wow. You're a sellout. Or like, you know, don't you think that's a conflict of interest? Like, how can you be an objective reporter and then put a uniform on? Like that's not going to work. Or like, nobody's going to hire you. Your career is going to be dead in news. And of course,
really?
Yeah.
That's shocking.
So, I mean, I had those concerns too. Like you know, as a reporter, it's our job to think of questions to ask other people. And now as a PAO, it's my job to train subject matter experts in uniform of, these are the questions that you should anticipate somebody asking you, right? So when I'm making my own life decisions, I try to make a list of questions that I need to ask myself about my next life choice. And so that was one, but I was fortunate enough that I had a friend from college who had gone through this program. And so I asked him directly, I said, you know, are there people in this PAO Reserve Corps who are working journalists? And can you connect me with them? I want to talk to them about how that works. And the more I went down that road and did my research, I was like, I think I can make this work. And I think if anything, it's going to broaden my horizons. It's going to challenge me. I think it's going to make me a better journalist. And hands down, I think now that I'm, you know, several years in, I can say that all of those things are true. So yes, everyone sort of initially thought I lost my mind. They may still think that, I don't really know. But for me, once I joined, it just made so much sense. Like, I'm a super adventurous person. I love learning about international relations, other cultures. I love meeting new people. I love being challenged. It was like, check. Like, how did I not even think of this earlier, actually, is what I ended up thinking once I had joined.
And wow. And I can totally relate on so many of those levels. I came into the Army at 29, and a lot of those same things from friends and family members and people thinking I totally lost my mind. And I also didn't have family members that had served. And so it was just like everybody thought.
What's your brother's in?
Oh, I don't have a brother.
Oh, I thought Eli.
No.
Okay.
No, it's okay.
Different guy.
It's all good.
Well, also, you know, you reminded me too that just like, how do you do it when you have all this life experience and then you're wearing the butter bars, right? I would say like the number one thing is, you know, humility. And I think even in my civilian career, even though I've been doing it for over a decade, being a TV reporter, I'm always trying, you know, that phrase where they say you never want to be the smartest person in a room. I'm always trying to find new rooms to enter where I can learn from the people around me. So it was difficult. Yeah, for sure. When people see butter bars, they assume you're 22. They assume you're out of college. They assume you have no life experience. And so it was difficult in the beginning to try to figure out how to navigate that. But I was so lost, like I didn't even know how to put a uniform on, that I was just like, I'm gonna play that card because I really don't know what's going on. And then as I got a little bit more like, okay, this is how you blouse your pants and like, this is how you put your ribbons on. Then I started saying, you know, here's what I think about how we might want to engage with this media if I was like on some sort of exercise. So it was a slow thing, but I think if you walk in there and you expect to be treated at a level that you haven't gotten to yet, then it's going to be a very frustrating thing.
And you guys can both totally, rib me on this question, but I mean it very, very seriously. Why the Navy? Why was it just that was the first recruiter's office that you could find?
Well, it was the only branch that had, as far as I knew, a direct commission officer program that was like the one that I was going through. I did do like a tiny bit of research into if other branches had something like that. But back when I joined, we didn't actually have to go through all of OCS. They had an abbreviated version for us. And then that became very controversial. Like everyone was talking about, should there be an abbreviated version or should they have to go through all of OCS? And there were pros and cons to both sides of the argument. They were worried that if they make people go through the full OCS, that could potentially impact the type of candidates that they're recruiting, because there's a lot of us who have pretty hardcore civilian careers that maybe we wouldn't do it had we known that we would have to take 2 to 3 months off of our civilian careers to go do that. So I was lucky in the sense that I didn't have to go through that. But that was another reason that it attracted me to it, is because the time that I would have had to take off work wasn't that great. I did have to do a qualifications course through the Defense Information School at Fort Meade, but that was mostly remote. I signed a little piece of paper that said, you're going to have 20 to 30 hours of work a week. And I was like, I got a master's from Northwestern. I'm good. This is going to be easy peasy. What is this military qualification? Oh my God. I got put on like academic probation, like my second week of the class, because I wasn't actually like doing the reading, and I actually like needed to do the reading to like pass the class. So that was a lot. So
they don't play.
Yeah, no, they don't. They don't play at all. And so, yeah, I was doing my 40-hour-a-week job, doing 20 hours of this qualification course on top of it remotely. And then all of a sudden, I had to get my butt into gear because I was having to take these physical readiness tests. And by the way, when I joined the Navy, I couldn't do one single push-up. So all of a sudden I was getting my butt to the gym every day. And so, yeah, again, people were like, wow, they were like, are they paying you to do this qualifications course? And I was like, no. And when I said it out loud, I was like, what am I doing with myself? But I mean, I'm learning a lot. I'm like networking and meeting the most amazing, interesting people who also now have become more like not even just friends, like family to me. I've gotten a chance to travel all over the world with the Navy. I have this new skill set that if I were to decide to leave the news business, and even now being in the news business, like I said, I think about things in like a completely different way because of that public affairs training. So even though it was like crazy during that first year when I joined the Navy, I think it was totally worth it, but definitely not for everyone, probably.
And it doesn't hurt that you have a security clearance either.
Sorry?
And it doesn't hurt that you have a security clearance now either.
Exactly.
Talk about differentiated talent. I can go a whole bunch of places that you can't go. See ya.
Well, so the other really interesting similarity between news and military is we're in this very bubble world where we can't imagine anything outside of that world. Like people who work in news, we also move around every 2 to 3 years. We go from small market to medium-sized market to big market. And so whenever I was unemployed in the news business before I joined the military, I was like, oh my God, my world is over. I don't even know anyone who's not a TV reporter. I don't have any practical skills. The only thing I know how to do is go on TV and talk for about 1 minute and 45 seconds, and that's it. And what the heck am I going to do with that skill set? So yeah, and the military is kind of the same way. Like a lot of people, when they get off active duty, they're just like, oh my gosh, like the big, wide, scary world is out there and I don't know what to do with myself. And so joining the reserve, I met people who had like all kinds of jobs, and they exposed me to all different things that like adults can do with themselves. And now that I have this public affairs training, I'm like, okay, it's going to be okay. Like I can find something else to do with myself if for whatever reason this doesn't work out.
And there's a huge network you can leverage and tap into with careers. I mean, I tell people that are going to dental school, I'm like, let the Navy pay for your dental school. After you get done doing your dental work, then you go ahead, you're debt free, you don't have any, and then you can go and get in with one of the reserve guys who's got to practice out in town, making a ton of money, and now you're set. Like it's
100%.
easy.
And your time in the military, it's like when you're that dentist or you're that public affairs officer, you have access to the entire military and you get to see stuff that no one else gets to see. If you were a public affairs officer for, let's just say, like McDonald's or Coca-Cola or any of those big like Fortune 500 companies, it's not that same gratifying experience as being, like I've been on a carrier, I've been, with Marines in Thailand. Like it's just a totally different set of experiences.
Marines in Thailand makes me giggle.
I don't know if you guys have heard of Cobra Gold. It's an exercise, and like the only thing
I
that
do. It's the Asian, yeah.
They drink the cobra blood because they do jungle survival. Yeah, with the Thai Marines, and like, wow.
It's pretty intense.
Yeah, I was like, definitely would not have had this experience had I not put a uniform on. So
no, and you know what? You probably feel like you're lying to people when you're telling them the stories. You're like, let me tell you how it is, and they're like, right, sure.
Yeah, they were like, you went. They're like, oh, how did your vacation in Thailand go? And I'm like, yeah, it was an exercise, not a vacation. And I was in the middle of a jungle with these Thai Marines who were swinging chickens around by their necks, trying to show you how to, if you need to get food to survive and eat. Yeah, this is what you do. So that was my vacation in Thailand. How was yours?
Priya, I want to ask, and I'm so passionate about this, on the just anybody that puts on the uniform as a reservist, as a guardsman, as a reservist. And I'm in the Army Reserve. You're in the Naval Reserve. I know a lot of folks that are in the Air Force Reserve. There's a very small Marine Reserve, I believe. But it is, a lot of folks don't understand the challenges of living the dual life. So Priya, you probably are used to logging into your, as we affectionately refer to as like that OWA, and logging into your to your military email after a long day and after you've probably been on the air and doing stories and things like that, and you check your email and it's some metrics, and you've got to make sure that that the Navy knows that you got your flu vaccine or something like that. The living that life of both wearing the uniform as well as being a professional. What is that like for you? And I mean, just be honest about some of the challenges, but also, I mean, we've been talking about some of the fun experiences, but I'm just curious your perspective on that.
So I would say the biggest thing, and I remember someone sent me like this blog post about what it's like to be a reservist. And I was like, oh my God, this speaks to me so much. And it just talked all about the guilt, how you constantly feel guilty. So it's so weird because I've been really, really lucky that I've worked for like such supportive companies that are always like, we're so proud of you. You don't worry about anything. We're going to hold down the fort here, but you just can't help yourself. Like every time I find out I'm getting orders, I start having like heart palpitations and I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have to tell my managers and I'm going to have to tell my coworkers. And then it's like, even when people don't mean to say vacation, they sometimes say it, and you're like, and especially in the Navy, we get to go to such amazing places because we're always by the water. So I'm constantly being sent to places like Hawaii. And most recently I went to Alaska and all my friends are like, oh my God, I've been dying to go to Alaska. And I'm like, it's not like that though. Like, I'm not going to get to go see Denali or like go find the Northern Lights. Like I'm going to be working probably 7 days a week, like 14-hour days at the least, so it's frustrating because you feel like people don't get it. And then when you come back, you're exhausted, like mentally, and you feel like you just went through this whole big thing, but you also don't want to come back to work and look exhausted at all. You want to be like right on your game because you don't want them to feel as though the Navy has somehow made you a lesser employee. So I'm constantly struggling with that guilt. And then also I've gotten better about realizing that like it's important to take mental health and physical health breaks. And so when I first joined, it was so hard for me to like ask for vacation days because of that whole concept where I was like, well, I just left you for a month. I certainly can't ask for vacation days now. And so I just would never use my vacation. And I find that with so many reservists that we don't use our vacation days, and it's like not okay. Like we should use them. And again, I'm super thankful because I went on NBC just had the Olympics for a few weeks, and we were told by our managers that we really shouldn't go on vacation because we were trying to learn a new system. But I asked my bosses, I was like, can I please go? I feel like a little bit burnt out. Like, And they said, go for it. And they allowed me to go. And I needed it so much. I didn't realize it. And I came back and I just felt so much more re-energized about work. So I would say that's like the number one thing. And it's hard to like bounce between the two worlds. Like you almost feel a little bipolar, like, especially with the types of jobs that I have, because they're both really intense and they're both really stressful, but they're very different. So it's always like when I go and start going on orders, it takes me a few days to like get back into it. And then it's the same thing when I come home. And, you know, the only other people who really get it are your reservist buddies. And I think that's like why we're all so tight, because and my units have been so amazing. We all like check on each other when people are coming on and off orders to make sure everyone's good. So having that extra support system, like I've gone through a few personal things over the past few years, and my Navy friends have actually been there for me in a bigger way than a lot of my friends in the TV world who I'd known for like 1,000 years. And I think it's because we had such weird, unique experiences together. And we also were the only ones who could understand like having 25 balls up in the air and feeling like you're always on the verge of about to like drop all of them or one of them or whatever it is. So I would say that's how it feels.
I just want to comment on what you just said. It was, you have this guilt. When you said guilt, it makes total sense. Am I doing too much for this one? Am I not doing enough for this one? I'm spread too thin. And if you got a family and you got to deal with all that whole different dynamic, and it's just you're never 100% where you need to be, and it's just really frustrating. One of the things this will be my last point or question. With active duty, and I was active duty guy, and for me, I was a personnel. So every time there's a reservist unit coming in every other weekend, I'd have to come in on the weekend, which kind of created sorts of a contention for me. And it wasn't until I started working with directly with reservists, because the active duty resources were depleted, and there were these reservists would start coming in to fill in those gaps, that I started to realize, holy smoke, these guys are incredible. We had guys that were surgeons, that were cooks, because in the Navy, because they just wanted to do something different. And they just brought this wealth of experience and logistics and just all these things that I was just blown away. I'm like, I need to rethink this here. And I think, what do you do on when you're called to drill or orders, active orders? What do you do to try and bridge that gap and educate the active duty folks?
Yeah, that's like that was like going to be the other point that I mentioned, is that people will sometimes treat you in many different ways based off of a variety of different things. I've had some active duty people who are like, oh, the reservists just have it so good. They don't have to do any of the BS work on the bases. They just get to go on the exercises. Like they get to do the fun stuff while the active duty people like hold down the fort and do all the admin stuff. So I've had that said to me a lot. I've had a lot of people who said, well, oh my God, I met this terrible reservist in 1984 and he was so lazy, and oh my God, reservists are just like the worst. And I'm like, that's like saying I met someone from New Jersey 6 years ago and I hate everyone from New Jersey. Like, do you realize how dumb that sounds? Like, not all reservists are the same.
But does it? It's Jersey. I mean, does it? I'm kidding. Yeah. I'm kidding. Mostly.
But, I would say like a lot of reservists have like super interesting backstories as to like why they decided to join and why they're deciding to juggle all these balls into the air. And as you rightly mentioned, they also have like all of these other civilian skill sets that actually, I think, make them better when they put their uniform on, because they don't just have this one institutional knowledge. They can bring in stuff that they've learned from other organizations and other things. So yeah, I mean, it was a challenge for me in the beginning to like advocate for myself and step up for myself. And I was super lucky because this last set of orders I went with my chief, who he was very like protective over me. Like we went into this Air Force active duty unit and he was just like, no, you need to listen to her. She knows what she's talking about. So I was like, wow, you're like my hype man. I want you to just like follow me around in life and just like, put him up. Yeah, like I'm like, It's great. But, you know, he had been in active duty. I mean, he didn't become a chief until he joined the reserves, but he had been active duty for over 10 years. So he is more, I think, comfortable than I was necessarily at sort of like being like, here's how, and, you know, having the anchors, obviously, as you know, being a chief, you can sort of say stuff and people listen to you. But yeah, I mean, it's difficult. I try to, like I said, I try to read the room. I try to figure out like who is my chain of command in every instance that I'm at, who are the officers who are around my level. And the bottom line is like, no matter where you go, whether it's the military or normal life, you're going to have some people who are receptive and open-minded and other people who aren't. And the only thing you can control is yourself. And so I always try to walk into situations with humility and then figure out like what's the best way to game this group of people so that we can be the most productive team members. And sometimes that's met with like open arms, and other times it's met with a lot of resistance. And so you just realize that you can't win every battle, but you just do the best that you can.
It's a great lesson.
Amazing.
Shalom?
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit of that family that you've developed. Obviously, you've talked about the family of your unit. But I know that there were a number of people that have been super helpful to you as you embarked in that midlife crisis or whatever the heck it is. But you started talking a little bit about military veterans in journalism. So tell us a little bit about the work. And I know you're on the board of directors, yet another identity for you.
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about it. As you guys probably remember, or, you know, most of your audience as well, when you come off active duty, you have that, oh my God, what am I going to do with myself? Are the skills that I learned in the military transferable to the civilian world? And what I realized being a public affairs officer is in the Navy, the enlisted ranks that go with that community are called MCs, so mass communication specialists. They have learned how to shoot video, edit video, take pictures, interview people, write articles. Those skills are exactly what I do in the civilian world. And I've been so impressed by some of these young people and just the creativity they have. And some of these social media videos that they make, I'm like, where did you get that idea? That's so amazing. And so when I've gone on orders, I've asked a lot of these young people what you're going to do when you leave the military. And a lot of them are like, oh, I'm just going to go home to North Carolina and be a mechanic. And I'm like, but why? Like, why would you waste all of this talent and you've learned all these skills in the Navy or whatever branch of the military? Why wouldn't you try to see if you can transfer that to something outside of the military? And a lot of them just hadn't really thought of it before. And as I was saying earlier, I think that there are very similar groups of people that are attracted to news and are attracted to the military. If you're an adrenaline junkie, if you want to serve your community, I mean, we're always on the go. We're not sitting down. We're not behind a desk. We're in the middle of a hurricane. We're in the middle of, sadly, sometimes a terrorist attack. We're with people at the best and the worst moments of their life. And especially during COVID, people who were watching local news they wanted to know, can I go to my gym? Where do I get my unemployment checks from? What is happening with the presidential? I mean, people were really watching the news. And so that's a real way to serve your community. So anyhow, I'm super passionate about it. The news is a very difficult industry sometimes to break into. I had to have a lot of people reach out to me through my Northwestern network and help me, especially in the early stages of my career. So what MVJ is it's for young people. Maybe you're coming off active duty and you think journalism might be a field I'm interested in. Reach out to us. We have a mentorship program. We have amazing people like Jake Tapper, Barbara Starr from CNN, who covers the Pentagon, people who both cover the military and national security, and people who are veterans who are in the business, who will help you make a portfolio, make a resume, make a reel, get you an internship, and figure out how to make your way through the journalism ranks. And even if you're not sure and you just want to talk about it with someone, like hit us up and we can talk you through it. So that's
Angel has a face for radio. I know it.
I have the best journalism story ever. I was on the U.S. Remember that captain I was telling you about that got promoted and the commander? We were on the USS Constellation, and Tim Allen came on the ship. The guy from Tool Time, that guy.
Home
Improvement guy, right? Like Home Improvement. He came on. I was striking. I was doing my qualifications for journalist, which was the predecessor to mass communication. And they said, "Hey, Torres, you want to interview Tim Allen?" I'm like, "Okay." So I just the other day when I'm here in my office, 30 or 20 It was a few years later. Pulled up the article that I wrote on Tim Allen. I was like, oh my gosh, good Lord.
See, it's an amazing memory. And when you get to do that stuff in the military too, you get to meet all these interesting folks and interview them and do stories on them. It's cool.
No, that's awesome. And definitely I encourage everybody to check out mvj.network. Awesome resource. And it sounds like some amazing people like you, Priya, offering to help folks. And really, I just can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I find everything that you're doing so relatable, and I'm excited for you for on both sides. And we say in the Army, citizen soldier, but citizen sailor, and both sides, so much opportunities. I know I heard your story somewhere else, and I just reached out and I was like, wow, we just have to have you on, because that's exactly what this is all about. We all serve, finding your way to serve. If you were just a journalist, that's service into itself. But for what you're doing, and I know you've got a long time to go in both of these careers, so I'm excited to see all that you will accomplish and do. So excited for that. Angel, any closing comments?
No, I just want to thank you. I can't wait to go to San Diego and we can go hike Potato Chip Mountain, take your little puppy up there. I'm a big San Diego guy. Went to USD. I love that school. I love being up on the hill. But seriously, I think that you have such a huge, impactful career. I mean, you're like, some people talk about what they do throughout their career, and you've done so much already. And I can see the hunger and the drive and the passion to do more. And I just look forward to seeing what happens next.
Well, thank you guys so much. That's so sweet. And it's always fun for me to do these things and take myself back through my history and remind myself why I'm doing all the things that I'm doing. So I appreciate you indulging me on this trip down memory lane.
Absolutely. And as we come to a conclusion over here, we'll be back next week with another episode. Episode 51, we're entering into a whole new era over here on We All Serve. But definitely make sure you get on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, all that sort of good stuff. Subscribe, rate, review, and share, so you'll be notified of all of the upcoming conversations. Priya Sridhar, thank you again. Angel, great to see you, brother. And we'll see you next week.